Okay, so we're live and recording now. I'm just going to do a quick introduction and then I will leave the screen and you'll have the full screen. Okay, so tonight we're very excited to be joined by two fascinating individuals. Gian Piero Ambrosi is a writer, investigative reporter, documentary film producer, and founded Oak Grove Films in 2019. I got that right, 2019. And your investigative art forgery documentary, The Royal Stunt, is slated to come out early 2003. I'm really excited to talk about that. So just on everyone's radar. Tony Tetreault is considered one of the world's greatest living art forgers with a career that spanned over 30 years. Tony forged works from some of the most renowned artists, including Salvador Dali, Norman Rockwell, and has had his works legitimized in museums, galleries, and auction houses across the world. Together, these two have co-authored a recent memoir from Hachette Books that won, very excitedly, Apple's Best Books of the Year. Congratulations on that. It's called Con Artists, The Life and Crimes of the World's Greatest Art Forger. So tonight, these two are going to delve into some of the gems that you can find in Con Artists. Like I said, I'm going to hop off the camera so you two can get the conversation going. For our listeners on YouTube, don't forget to leave your comments in the comment section. And if you're using Crowdcast, you can leave a question with the Ask a Question button that's at the bottom of your screen. At the end, we'll spend some time answering those questions. So with that, let's get started.
Okay. Now I can see.
Hi, there we go.
Hello.
Hey,
Up until a second ago, I couldn't see me on the screen.
look at you now. You look great. So, well, Tony, let's just jump right in. One of the things that most people think, or one of the big misconceptions, 95% of the people who think they know what an art forger is have it wrong. They think you copy paintings. What's the difference between somebody who copies paintings and an art forger?
Copying paintings, if you're an art forger, would be really stupid. There are paintings all over the world, and there was one man before I got arrested that sold a Renoir that's in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which is really kind of stupid. I came up with a new painting for each artist, a painting that never exists. I guess I called them emulations. And in my trial, there was the prosecution had an attorney that specialized in art law. And she said there's no such word as emulation.
Emulation.
Yeah, it's a word she said that Mr. Tetreault made up.
What's an example of an emulation? Like you would take pieces of Chagall's and put them together. Give us an example.
Okay, let's talk about Chagall. Chagall did many, many works. And I would come up with the Chagall that never existed. What I had to do more than anything is get the colors right. Chagall put colors together that nobody ever did in the history of art. And you had to be right on the colors. But I would come up with elements that are in one Chagall, elements in another Chagall, put them all together, but it had to be cohesive. It had to be together. It had to look like a Chagall.
So you might take different iconic things from Chagall,
right?
Combine them into a new piece that never existed.
And also had to be aware that sometimes he would put things in the 30s that he wouldn't put in the 60s. So you have to be, if I'm doing a painting from the 50s, it has to be correct with the elements that are within the painting.
Right.
The same goes with every artist.
Everybody always assumes that, one question that I've always heard people ask you is, hey, if you love painting so much and you're such a great painter, why don't you paint your own stuff? And I think you told me once, sitting in front of a blank canvas was like hard labor.
It wasn't so much that. It's that every artist that is known has had art shows I was married, I was young, and I didn't know anything about art, let alone having a one-man show. Do you know, I just went to my first one-man show, and it was me. And they did it in this documentary. And so I didn't know the inner workings of art when I was very young. So I would go to, art shows, the ones in a neighborhood.
The art fairs.
Art fair, yeah, that's that better name. And I would do a Rembrandt and bring it. And I would work on it for a couple of weeks. I bring a Caravaggio, I bring a Chagall, I bring a Dali oil, and I didn't sell them. People wanted something to match their sofa. So this wasn't the outlet for me. And then, of course, we'll get into it about, I read a book called Fake.
Mm-hmm. So I know, and the book discusses a lot about kind of your early struggles. You're 15 in Fulton, New York. You get your girlfriend pregnant. And the next thing you know, you're 16. You have a wife. You have a baby. You have a job on a milk truck, and you're thinking, "Oh man, I'm not doing this for the rest of my life." And so one day you're walking in the supermarket, and what happens?
Um, I was married at the time, and there was a paperback around. Every supermarket has them where you could grab a paper. One caught my eye called Fake by Clifford Irving. And as I was reading, I got home and I devoured it. As I'm reading, I kept saying to myself, I could do this. I could do this. And then after I got done, I tried. And if I were older, if I wasn't so young, I would have thought about it more. Probably wouldn't have done it. Because I was young and dumb, I tried it and it worked. My first sale was a Modigliani, which was too much. I should have never gone that high. A Modigliani drawing, and I sold it for $1,600, which was all the money in the world.
I think we said in the book it's something like, it would have been like 10 times your rent at the time.
It was my rent, yeah.
About $160.
$125.
So, huge win for you.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. So what is it that you like about forgery, the process of forging? What part of that do you like?
I think the word should be liked.
Liked.
Past tense. That was like coming up with something, like figuring out a puzzle. You didn't ask me this question before. It was like putting a puzzle together and trying to figure it out. And the better you could do it, the better it would be. And so I tried to do it as good as possible. The aging, even a Picasso had to be aged. And that, I saw this art forger on 60 Minutes. He was in a park and he rubbed dirt on the back of it. Oh my God, it was that easy. Anyway, I did enjoy it. I liked the oohs and ahs I got from art dealers.
Mm-hmm.
I never really heard from the public. But the word got out. I had 7 or 8 art dealers over a period of time. And they would tell me how good I was. And then I found out that each one of them were making 3 times the money I was making or more.
Let's talk a little bit about the book. So tell me about the process of putting this book together, writing this book.
You talking about talking to you on the phone for 6 months? Is that what you're talking about?
Sure.
I mean, what is the process? You wrote the book and you talked to me. Well, he asked me at least 5, 10 questions, the same question 10 times. And he wasn't trying to come up with his own answer. He did get things out of me that I didn't think of, that I would have never said.
Yeah.
But it went on and on and on. It got old.
Poor guy. I just squeezed you until you couldn't give anymore. But I mean, we were talking about this before. It seems like it's repetitive, and sometimes you get mad at me and you'd say like, just write whatever the hell you want. But the fact is that, sometimes these details, like I remember I asked you, you said, when I was 9 or 10, you took a trip to California, a flight to California. And I asked you, what were you wearing? You said, well, who cares? Why does it matter? But in fact, it kind of matters if you're wearing.
I don't today. I don't know what I said then.
Yeah.
Today, I don't remember what I was wearing in 1960 on the airplane when we were.
Point being, if you wore a suit, that's very different than if you just went on casually.
Well,
like, was it a special occasion or was it a big deal?
In 1960, flying across the country, flying in an airplane, men wore suits. They take the coat off, maybe put it someplace. And there'd always be a white shirt and tie. That's interesting. I think that I dressed up like going to church with pants on and
so it was like a special event. It wasn't like an everyday thing for you. Now you've read the book. What do you think of it?
Don't you think I'm a little prejudiced?
Well, you're the subject.
Okay. Here, I thought my story was interesting. I told it to you. You seem to be interested in it. I think that it's more interesting than I really am. But it's wonderful. It's like the chapters, how that builds up to a crescendo. It's just wonderful.
What would you say is, like one of the more favorite parts of the book for you?
The most satisfying part of the book.
Let's put it that way. Yeah.
It was, I was in a restaurant. I don't think we mention the name of the restaurant or we changed it? Silvio.
I can't remember. From the book to the film to the documentary. I can't remember.
Went to a restaurant. It used to be Sonny Bono's restaurant, the actor, the comedian, whatever he was. And it was on a Saturday night. You could walk in and sit down. The food wasn't that good. Anyway, he sold it to a friend of mine, an art dealer. And it became the #1 restaurant in Los Angeles. It was so popular. It was on La Cienega and Melrose, right there. And it was a perfect location. And the owner, I made him so much money, he would give me table 13, the only booth in the restaurant.
Sorry, and you made him money because he was an art dealer.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And he made a lot of money. And I didn't realize until later how much money they were making compared to me.
Sure. So he gave you this great booth.
And he would often, he liked to be a host and greet people at the door of his own restaurant. But it was named after the chef, Silvio. And I go in there, I see Clint Eastwood and Gene Hackman having dinner together at a two-top. And I'd sit in the booth because it was very important that time. Yeah. In the 80s, it was important where you sat in a restaurant.
So they see you.
And they're going, who the fuck is this guy? And anyway, I always sat at table 13. And the owner, whose name I can't mention, always reserved it for me. I never sat anyplace else than table 13. So we had Art Week. It's called Art Expo in Los Angeles. No longer, doesn't exist anymore. But it was a big deal. Los Angeles isn't that great of an art market, but they come from all over the world. And they all wanted to eat at this art dealer's restaurant called Silvio. Everybody wanted to eat there. And so one night I went there and I have a new white Lamborghini Countach. And it was parked right out front. It was a very rare car. It caused chaos at the time. And we went in and I sat with the one art dealer named, I can mention his name because he was my good friend. He didn't care. He came out and he filmed this documentary with me. And because we had to have somebody from the past talking about what went on other than me to give it, believability. So Tom Wallace, his name was, he was a cop and head of the Art Bunko division of the Nassau County. It wasn't New York, Nassau County. So he arrested a lot of people at the art show. He has. And Tommy and I were sitting together in the booth, and I kept hearing my name whispered, Tony Tetro, Tony Tetro, Tony Tetro. I'm going, Tommy, I keep hearing my name. Do you keep hearing? He goes, he's very thick Brooklyn accent, but he lives in Long Island. He goes, you've been discovered.
You've been discovered.
Yeah, I can't do it. And he goes, you're the Prince of Fugazi. And I go, what do you mean? And he says, they all know about you. And I never knew anything about that. I just knew my customers, my art dealers that I dealt with. Apparently, everybody in the room knew about me, but they didn't know what I looked like.
So that's your favorite part of the book. What's your least favorite part of the book?
Laura playing me.
Oh,
like she did.
Well,
huh? What? It's not the first time or the last.
Left some scars, huh?
It was fun.
What do you think about the title? I came up with that title. I don't know.
Well, you got yours. I like what Tommy said, the Prince of Fugazi.
Well, there's a chapter called that. Now, we jogged your memory a lot because some of this stuff was, 50 years ago. Is there anything that came up in the process of, being interviewed from this book that kind of surprised you? I had forgotten all that. And, oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, well, it's because my memory's getting worse. And so when I read it, I don't remember telling you this in the 6 months that we were battling each other on the phone. No, like something. What do you mean, surprised?
Yeah, was there anything that we sort of went over and you went, oh yeah, I'd forgotten about that, or that we kind of worked out? We had to kind of meticulously put things together in order and whatnot. Is there anything that you can think of that sort of really surprised you, or that came back to you vividly?
No. Yes, when I was in Rome and I went all over, I went and
to the Borghese.
Oh, the Borghese's. If you ever go to Italy, go to the Villa Borghese. It's magnificent, even if you don't like art.
Mhm.
I like Caravaggio's there, and I love Bernini. I think that Bernini is the most underrated artist in history.
Mhm.
I think he was the equal to Michelangelo.
All right, let's talk for a second. So we kind of had a lot of furor a little while ago from the James Stunt scandal.
Uh-huh.
So for those who don't know or haven't read the book yet, what happened was that this, flamboyant British billionaire, it was discovered you did some paintings, about a dozen paintings for him for his home as reproductions, just as decorative pieces.
Not reproductions.
Sorry, let's just say as decorative pieces, not as
Decorative.
forgeries, that he was going to use to decorate his home.
Right.
Instead, you went to his house to visit and you found that he did something with your pieces and they were on a legal contract. Right?
Wow.
Tell us a little bit about that. So 2017, you went to visit Stunt.
Let's talk about a minute before
Sure.
I met Stunt. He would call me every night and we would talk. And he was up all night. He was doing drugs. He had his demons. And he'd sleep all day. So I go to London. I'd be by myself with his bodyguards and his servants and his cook and his what do you call his manager, the guy who looked over the house.
Mm-hmm.
I'd sit with them all day long. I liked them. And they'd take me out, show me things around. But out of boredom, there was a stack of papers, and I grabbed them to look at them. And there were my paintings that I did for him. And
they were
had
involved.
Photographs of my paintings, and they were talking about, what is the name of that gallery? The Wildenstein Gallery in Paris. I know, I can't never remember their name, but they would not authenticate a Dali.
He had your paintings, but he used Wildenstein to authenticate them,
all of them
on these contracts,
which was just ridiculous. There's no way that he could get away with this, and it was wrong. And I knew that I smelled trouble. I smelled big trouble.
So what'd you do?
I photographed them, all of them, and all his bodyguards were around watching me. Nobody said anything. Mm-hmm. I kept clicking, and I came back and showed them to you.
Right. So when I saw them, I mean, it was clear. I remember you told me that it was Prince Philip or something.
I did.
You said,
I got my princes mixed.
Right. So
his daddy.
Yeah, I looked at them too, and I thought immediately there's something fishy here, and I knew that something was going on. So when I brought them to Keith, the director of the film, we went there, and I said, "Hey, something's fishy going on," and he said, "Prove it." And so off I went to London with a kind of an undercover film crew, and we discovered a few things. We discovered that James Stunt was taking your paintings and putting them into the collection of Prince, now King Charles.
Right?
Were you surprised?
Absolutely. You see, everything, if you think about it, and I'm sure you have, but most people reading the book, they might not realize that everything pointed to me as doing this and doing this to Prince Charles, or King Charles it is now, and that I would be in a British prison if I didn't take those photographs. Yeah, that's how bad it was.
Yeah. So we kind of uncovered this story and broke it to the Daily Mail that came out in Vanity Fair and stuff, and that was like half of it. Then we discovered a whole bunch of other stuff in the documentary, which will come out in 2023. But now, you're privy to some of the material that we discovered and some of the things that we found out. What's kind of surprising that came out of that for you?
That you haven't showed me the documentary yet. That's surprising. There's things like there's a British historian, art historian, and I really like him. His name is Andrew Graham Dixon. And I've watched him on YouTube, and I've read his book. He wrote the Bible on Caravaggio. And so I wanted to meet him, and I wanted to sit and talk with him about Caravaggio. Now, I was foolish. Why would the world, one of the most famous art historians in the world, and in my opinion, the best, I like him. And why would he want to talk to an art forger about anything? An art historian like that. But he came, and he interviewed me, and we talked. But he didn't want to talk about art with me. And I brought a painting. I did a painting of a girl. a Caravaggio of her is Mona Lisa. It was a Caravaggio Mona Lisa. And my home is dark. Can you tell that it's dark? John Piero's complaining about it.
It's like we're in a cellar down here.
I'm one of those few people who prefer to be in a dark room than being in a sunlit room. I feel comfortable with in dark lighting. But anyway, in my home, I had this painting. It'll look wonderful. And so I grabbed it and boxed it, didn't look at it when I took it outside. I didn't. That painting right there, it's one of my favorites. It looks terrible outside. It's a Bouguereau. You can't see it.
So you showed it to Dixon.
I showed it to Dixon. And I don't say I showed it to Dixon. I said to you 20 times. 20 times. I don't want him to see this. This is terrible.
Eventually Dixon saw it.
Dixon saw it, and John Piero mentioned to me, he said your painting wasn't very good. So now think about this. They're doing a documentary, and I have somebody that I admire saying that painting isn't very good. Did you say, I want you to know, did you say
before the jury?
Yes. Did you say that it was that I said it was horrible? I don't want him to see it.
You did say on camera.
Is it in the film?
You did say on camera in the film, this painting is horrible.
Okay, good.
All right.
Well, I wish I didn't bring it.
So that surprised you the most about the
Yeah, I haven't seen the film, so I can't.
Okay. Well, let's move on a little bit. Now, did you ever meet other forgers during your career? Like, were you in the circle of other forgers or not really?
Not at all.
There was the one Vlaminck guy.
I wasn't in the, what was that?
There was the Vlaminck guy, the guy who.
Oh, yes. I had a guy named Carl Marcus. His name is in the book, and he passed away. And he owned an auction house.
But the forger came into his.
Yes, a guy. His name is Maurice Vlaminck.
That's right, Maurice
Vlaminck.
I think so. That's right. Yeah.
And Maurice Vlaminck, he was an impressionist, and his stuff looks very amateur. If you see a Vlaminck,
he's a Fauvist. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, he was. And this guy came in to sell a Vlaminck, and to me, well, no, this is a fact. This is not just my opinion. The provenance on a painting, the history from when the artist did it, all the owners to the present day, is more important than the art itself. And I mean that. Well, this guy came in, and Carl wanted me to look at this Vlaminck. I know nothing about Vlaminck, really. I know what his work looks like. So I asked to see his provenance. What do you have to prove it? And this guy, it's funny. He had a picture of him with Vlaminck's wife and his arm around her. And he obviously cut out his face and glued it and then photographed it. It was the corniest thing I've ever seen in my life. So that's my only encounter.
Right. But so you never really, I mean, it wasn't like you hung, there was no art forgers convention.
I didn't even hang out with other artists.
Right.
Artists are more vain than actors. I know no artists in Los Angeles area or where I live.
What's your advice to somebody who is considering buying art? What would you say to somebody who wants to buy it?
Buy something that you simply love, that you love it, and buy it if you love it. Don't buy it because it's valuable unless you're a big time collector, and you'll have people guiding you if you have a lot of money. If you like to go into a gallery and buy a print, I can't tell you. It's up to the gallery owner how well they researched it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know about every artist. I could tell you I could walk into a gallery, look at a Chagall, a Dali, Picasso, Miro. I could tell.
Mm-hmm.
But
most people can't. It's tough.
Right.
It's tough to do, so you should buy what you love. Okay.
Or have somebody like me copy it. Get a good photo of it and have somebody copy it. I did that for a lot of people for insurance purposes.
Yeah.
I used to do paintings, and it was 5% annually of the appraised value, which is very expensive when they get into the millions of dollars. So people would put theirs in a vault and they'd hang mine.
Yeah, that's a good move. So now let's move on to another beloved subject, cars. What car are you driving these days? You were the book talks about your love of Ferraris. You even faked a Ferrari, you forged a Ferrari. What are you driving these days?
Wow, before COVID, I just crashed a 100-point Concours 599 Ferrari with no exhaust. Now, people who are into the environment might be upset with that, but to a Ferrari owner, smog. What do you call
it?
No catalytic converter, and I got it smogged. Legally, got it smogged.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, the sound of a of a 6-liter Ferrari. It's just beautiful. And I crashed and cut a twin light pole in half, landed on my head. Police came. I gave me an hour drunk test.
Oh boy.
Well,
You were clean. Now what? So what are you driving now?
Oh, I bought a Mercedes on eBay. Oh God, 16 years ago. It's called an AMG, an ML 6.3,
Mm-hmm.
and it's got a big V8 engine in it,
Mhm.
and it runs absolutely perfect. So a couple of years ago, I had it repainted, had the interior dyed, had the engine gone through everything,
Mhm.
got new tires, new brakes, and I'm perfectly happy. I have no desire. That's the car I drive every day, and I have a perfect 360 Ferrari, a Spider. It's black with tan interior. It's really cool. I like driving around that.
Yeah, it's a rocket for sure.
Oh, it's just fun to drive. Ferraris are literally more fun to drive than other cars.
What are your plans for the future? What do you want to do with the rest of your youth?
Oh, I'm either going to retire or make watches. I like watches.
Mhm.
I made this watch, but I don't want to get into my watch.
Well, so not painting?
No, I'm getting too old to. I don't have I can't sit for hours like I used to when I was younger.
How long does it take you to make a old master painting like a Caravaggio?
2 months.
2 months.
No, I have to think it out what I'm going to put on the canvas. Then I do it, and I make sure it's right. Something I found out: Caravaggio was arguably the fastest painter in the world, and he came out with these beautiful paintings, beautiful, sensitive, just holy paintings, better than anybody else. And he did them fast, like in 3 days he could come up with a painting. In 2 weeks he comes up with an altarpiece. Now Leonardo da Vinci would have contracts for 8 months, and he'd have two assistants. Caravaggio would do it by himself in 2 weeks. Unbelievable. Literally 20 times faster than Leonardo.
And Caravaggio, I remember you told me, would paint alla prima, so he would just paint directly.
He would never do not even a drawing on the canvas. He would use his paintbrush to make a drawing, and then he'd fill in with paint.
And
alla primas. In the United States, in English, it's called wet on wet, and he did it better than anybody.
And I remember that his biographer said it was almost cheating because he would just place models in whatever he was doing, and then just quickly paint them, and they said it was like cheating.
How could that be cheating?
It
sounds brilliant to me.
It sounds like envy.
That's what the guy was an artist, his biographer. Yeah. And should we talk about the letter, the ugliest letter I've ever read in my life?
Let's that's in the book.
Did you have the whole letter?
Oh yeah, not the whole letter, but the choice subjects.
Caravaggio wrote this horrible letter about this man who ended up 10 years after Caravaggio died. But Bellini, what was his name?
Baglioni,
I
think.
And he wrote this biography on Caravaggio, but he sued Caravaggio over this letter he wrote about him. He said his paintings look like shit.
I think the lesson here is that you don't really want to piss off your biographer.
Right.
You don't want your biographer
so
to be your enemy.
People wonder about all the information they had about Caravaggio was from this biographer who probably hated him.
Yeah. On the other hand, there is a lot of information about Caravaggio because he was involved in lots of court trials, and he was accused of murder and convicted. And
can you tell? You know more about this than me. I mentioned it to you. You looked it up about the man that worked for the Vatican. And his hobby was Caravaggio, and so he went and read all these old transcripts, everything from the 1600s, and looked for Caravaggio's name. And he found all sorts of stuff.
This was fascinating. You told me about it, and I looked it up, and there's a figure called the Devil's Advocate. And the Devil's Advocate is a person in the Vatican when they're going to canonize someone to become a saint. This person looks back into all of the historical record, which could be 12th century manuscript, could be property title thing.
And he's the man that he loved Caravaggio.
Correct. And he found all that information about Caravaggio. So you're interested in cars still?
Yeah. Well, My granddaughter told me she doesn't want me to buy anymore. I had 12 Ferraris. And she said, no more.
No more because of the crash.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're interested in watches.
Yeah.
You like to travel.
That's what I'd like to do, is keep traveling. But my leg gave out, and so I don't know. My daughter told me it's really rough. She just came back from Rome with her husband.
Yeah.
So it's really tough walking around.
Since we're kind of talking about the future and looking back, so what's the dumbest thing you ever did?
Oh, there's too many things. I can't even list one. There's so many. No, you're always recognized for what you did smart. Dumbest, I don't know. Bringing that Caravaggio to London was one of the dumbest things I ever did. That's it right there.
Wanting to talk to Andrew Graham Dixon. What do you think is the smartest thing you ever did, looking back in your career?
My career?
Yeah.
Okay. The smartest thing I ever did is in Florence, in the Uffizi. There was an old man. His name was Carl, and he was copying, which was a profession for centuries, copying paintings, and he was copying a Caravaggio. I think the smartest thing I've ever done is sit there and watch him, and he taught me how to paint flesh.
Mm-hmm.
Before I went, I couldn't paint flesh. You have that Rembrandt.
That's right.
That's the first painting I ever did with flesh.
That's right.
That, good flesh.
Yeah.
I should say good flesh.
Yeah.
He taught me how old masters do flesh, which is lucky to find him. That he put up with me for 4 days. I had to pay to get in the Uffizi 4 times. I kept going every day. I even went one time and got oils for him. He told me where to go. He gave me the address. I gave it to him. Before I went to the Uffizi the next day, I'd bring him all these oils and cleaning rags and thinners and linseed oil.
That's great. That was Carlo.
And I bought him a cap. What do you call those, like golf caps?
Yeah, like a
golf cap.
Sure.
Okay.
You have any regrets from your forgery career?
Regrets?
I've had a few.
Okay. It was 33 years ago. And for the first 5 years, I know I didn't have any regrets. But then I did. I finally realized that what I did was wrong. But then just when time went on, 33 years ago, I'm not going to fixate myself on being regretful.
Sure.
However, I have talked to a few, 3 or 4 of these art dealers through the years, 33 years, and always asked them, "Does anything come up and bite you? No? Have you heard of anything?" And they go, "No." No, and not for a second saying that it was victimless. It is. Because maybe in the future, the way technology is getting better, maybe somebody could find out something that I did, but I use the same paper as Chagall, same paper as Dali. I'd use, canvases. I'd get French canvases, Belgian. When I was in Paris, I'd buy a bunch of materials. And I'd use old canvases for old masters that I'd find, old European stretcher bars and everything. And I'd use the same pigments that they used. But they found out little things. I would read articles that were peer reviews on artists and things that they would find in art, scientists would find. Like in a Leonardo, if his favorite color was I can never remember the name of it.
Lapis lazuli?
No, it was lapis lazuli. What's it called? It's called no, not lapis lazuli. No, he didn't. No.
Oh, okay.
No, it's the color that comes from copper.
Are you talking about verdigris?
Verdigris was Leonardo da Vinci's favorite color, and it's made from copper. And so he had iron in the pigments, and they'd mix together, and it would take a century for it to show up, and it would turn black. This is something new they found.
Okay, so one last question, and then I'll check and see how we're doing here. Okay.
What are we doing?
We'll do one last question. You told me that you have a lot of people who contact you, or sometimes you have sort of groupies who want you to, teach them and whatever.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for people who say, "Oh, I'm so
Don't
interested
do
in what
it. Don't do it because you won't get away with it." I mean, the technology is just too much today. I couldn't do it.
Yeah,
it's probably a blessing I got caught.
Yeah, it
could have been worse.
Well, I mean, we could talk here for hours, and we'll gladly continue talking if you'd like us to. But otherwise, Lauren,
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you both for that. I feel like your last question kind of lends itself to one of the questions that we have. So we're just going to go through some questions before wrapping up. What does art forgery look like in 2022? What does it look like now with all of the technology that exists?
Do you know I haven't got that question yet? That's a good question. I want to tell you, it's like over. The technology has come up where people say actually like they can't get away with it. Um, I before I was arrested, there was upstairs gallery in Los Angeles, a chain. They got busted closed. There was Center Art Gallery in Hawaii, and then this one guy sold a Renoir. And
It's Frank de Marigny.
You can say his name.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, he did it, which was dumb. And then there was like, uh-oh, what's going on? We thought this was forever, and we thought it was the golden age, and then everybody started being more careful, and then I got busted. It stopped, and I've never heard it came back. But then I'm out of the loop with galleries and gallery owners now. This was again 33 years ago, so I don't really know what's going on, but I don't think it was nearly like it was when I was in action.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of, I'm just talking about what I know of the art world, which compared to both of you is very limited. But for instance, artificial intelligence art, AI art is like a very popular thing. And it's been in the news recently a lot as being something really controversial because it essentially is like a machine learning algorithm that takes bits and pieces of other artists' works and creates something new. Are you privy to that conversation? Do you have any opinions on sort of the future of that?
Yesterday or the day before, just read an article about AI. I was reading an article about me, by the way, and it was AI, and they looked at one of the Picassos that I did, and it was called
The Bathers.
The Bathers.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Picasso did only three ever in this. Only three. And so I came up with one and I was very happy with it. They were like aliens on a beach, strange creatures on the beach. And so then he quit that because he had to paint Guernica. Guernica? How do you pronounce it? Guernica. Mm-hmm. And it was in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, but now they brought it back to Guernica, where it came from. It was a war protest painting. He stopped doing these alien styles, and he started on Guernica. Okay.
So what did the AI find about your painting?
That it was 95% by AI, 95% bad.
So
bad.
I mean,
which there's nothing to compare it to. Only three paintings.
Yeah. I mean,
you have to have comparative.
I think it's really interesting. We've talked about this a little bit, and I don't think Tony's so much up on AI generated art, but definitely we've had the conversation about how AI and neural networks are being used to spot fakes. So what they can do is be trained on some works by whatever artist, and the AI can create a 3D map that can tell even individual brush strokes that brush stroke was by Van Gogh or it was not. It was by Forgery.
Right.
And so in a world like that, or they took a bunch of Egon Schiele drawings and they, trained it on 5 drawings or whatever, and then it could tell 99% accurately whether something was a fake or not. So in a world like that, I mean, the kind of thing that Tony was doing is virtually impossible.
Primarily because they could do it on a Picasso if they're going to do anything, but primarily there was nothing to compare it to.
Sure.
I go, Jesus. So should I talk about that?
Mm-hmm.
But if you saw the painting, you go, is that a Picasso? It's really weird.
It's unusual. Yeah.
Is it in the book?
Yeah.
It is. You got the.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Because it's from Dumfries' house.
It's in my book. This weird Picasso.
So we have a question. It says, "Hey, Tony, Crazy Steve here, enjoying the book. It's almost like we're sitting with you and listening to you, telling me about your adventures. You mentioned the Upland. You mentioned a bar in Upland, the Blind Duck. Is that a real place, or did you mean?"
I'm going to tell you. We changed names, and I just this morning asked Jean Pierre, "Why did you call it the Blind Duck?" Just this morning, it's called the Boar's Eye. And Stevie, Crazy Steve and I, we live right next to it. We just hop over a little fence. We even put a little stairs there so we can hop over the fence easier to get to the boar's head.
When you write a fact-based book, there are certain things that lawyers say, you can't make that identifiable.
Get off the camera. I'm going to take a sip of this.
You can do it on camera. It's okay. They have.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have a question for Giampiero. Can you tell us a little bit about your documentary that's coming out early next year, The Royal Stunt?
Sure. Yeah. So it is a documentary which shows the behind-the-scenes investigation that we did, which started, as I said, it started with Tony showing me these 3 cell phone photos.
There were more than 3.
There were 3 that you showed me.
Oh,
so there were 3 cell phone photos, and they were on some kind of document, but we weren't sure what it was. We didn't know what it was. And then, we went down this 3-year path of kind of, having to find out, let me phrase this delicately, gain access to James Stunt to learn about what his collection was. Did he actually put these paintings in the Royal Collection? Did anyone know who was involved? What was the ultimate goal? What was the fraud that was being committed? So it kind of tells that whole story from behind the scenes, and it's wacky and crazy. And, I don't know if anybody really knows who James Stunt is in America, but he is this, larger than life, flamboyant person who, he would drive around central London with a Lamborghini, Rolls Royces around it, and then Land Rovers around it. And he'd drive that to go get a pack of cigarettes. So, he had this crazy lifestyle and this larger than life persona. And, what he was doing is kind of uncovered in the film. And he would go on social media. And I remember after we broke the story, he came out and he said, I don't know Tony Tetro. I wouldn't hire Tony Tetro to paint my toilet, which of course was false because there's a million emails,
to paint my bog.
Yeah, he would paint, well, he said toilet and bog.
I like James Stunt. I want that to be perfectly clear. He was a gracious host. And I had a wonderful time visiting him in London. I went there twice to visit him. Mm-hmm. His wife threw him out, and I have a bad leg, and I had to climb 6 flights to get to my bedroom. That was my only complaint.
Yeah.
Other than him putting these paintings in Dumfries' house. But I want you to know that they're painting a picture of James Stunt, and he had his demons, but I liked him.
Yeah. Certainly an interesting guy.
Yes, he was. Yes, he is.
This question's for Tony. Can you talk a little bit about the first piece of art you forged, how you got started on this sort of road, this journey, and where did you learn how to make art in the first place?
Well, I painted since I was a child. My mother got me a painting kit, but I'm not a doodler. I just know how to paint, and I just got better and better. I was the only thing I got an A+ in his school. But how I got into forgery was I read a book. I said that earlier. Giampiero asked me, called Fake. And that inspired me to try it because I couldn't sell my paintings. I tried to, but didn't sell my paintings. And the very first forgery I did was a Modigliani. Did I say that right? Modigliani.
You got it.
He's born and raised in Italy, so Modigliani drawing. And it was of a naked woman. The painting of her, she was laying down. I had her sitting down in the same bed, which made it logical. And I started up much too high. Modigliani was too much. I should have done like a local painter. I don't know, Robert Woods, which I did a lot of. But anyway, I sold it for $1,600, and that was the beginning. I felt that was wealth to me. $1,600. This was about 1971. Stevie, did I know you? Are you still there? 1971? No, I didn't. I knew him in 1973.
Steve's in the book, right?
No.
Maybe.
I
don't think so.
Maybe the next book.
The last scenes, yeah. After you get busted.
Oh, really? He went to
Crazy party with you.
Yeah, Crazy Steve went to. Yeah, he did. Crazy Steve, you're in the book.
That's right.
So, what's the hardest art piece that you've worked with? You found it challenging.
Caravaggio, because they have to be on old canvases. They have to be do you know that every conservator, every scientist or art conservator will tell you that you get more information from the back of a painting than you do from the front. You can look at everything, and if it hasn't been, uh, what's the word for conservator?
Restored.
Restored. I couldn't think of the word restored, but I can think of conservative. If it hasn't been restored, that means they put a new canvas on the back, new stretcher bars. If it's raw, brand new, still needs restoration. That's difficult to do. And then to come up with the Caravaggio, if you know Caravaggio, he put you into the painting. There was nobody like him. And in my opinion, he was the biggest influence, the best influence on art ever was Caravaggio. More than Picasso. More than Picasso was. The reason there's a lot of this modern art, not many people are going to agree with me. Everybody wanted a Picasso. Everybody wanted a Picasso in the 40s. After the war, everybody wanted a Picasso. So they said, we can't get Picassos everybody wants. So other artists came up and they grabbed them because they needed artists to sell in the galleries all around the world. But everywhere around the world wanted Picasso. So he started the whole movement. So a lot of people say he was the biggest influence on art. And I think Caravaggio was.
In that vein, I'm curious if there are some people who are like just getting into art and want to learn more about the greats. Who are some underrated artists do you think that people should just know about? Maybe they don't know that much about, or less.
That's a good question.
Really good.
You're asking the wrong person. I'm out of the loop on that.
Well, let's say, why don't you talk a little bit about Artemisia?
Oh, perfect. Very good, Jean Pierre. Artemisia Gentileschi, correct?
Yes,
I have
sir.
a problem saying the last name. Her father was one of Caravaggio's best friends. He was with him when he wrote the letter. Artemisia was, she made history. She's got a great backstory. She was raped and she complained about it and went to court about it. That was unheard of.
This was in the 1600s.
1600. Oh, yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
So this was in the 1600s. And she won, but nothing happened to the man. Her father hired this man. Listen to this. Her father brought the suit up. Her father fired a man to teach her perspective. And so he comes in, and that happens. And his career was destroyed, literally destroyed, because his daughter was raped, which is how weird the Baroque was. Can you imagine somebody's father destroyed because of that?
So I think the thing that's interesting, right, about Artemisia is that she was not hugely recognized until fairly recently,
like 3 years ago,
something like that. But she was someone who was really underrated, and now is has exploded and is on par with most of the other great Baroque masters.
She again, let's say 5 years ago. Let's give it 5. 5 years ago, her paintings were selling for 300,000, 350,
500 maybe,
500 tops, and she did quite a few, I guess. Now they're in the 10 million range. They're huge. They're going to go up to 30 million, and I'd say in less than 10 years.
Yeah. And that's another good point that we talk about in the book, is that Caravaggio until the 50s was considered a second-rate, third-rate painter. Is now
51.
Probably considered the greatest painter of all time,
second to Leonardo. In dollar value, Caravaggio is second to Leonardo da Vinci. And it's a very good point. A man named Roberto Longhi, an art historian. I like a good art historian, somebody who can make art exciting. He said this Caravaggio is very good. They considered him a second, third-rate artist. Nobody cared about him. In 1951, he put on a show, a retrospective of Caravaggio. 400,000 people came, and Caravaggio went. He was rediscovered. Back in his time, he was the most popular artist.
I mean, it's right. It's amazing to think that Caravaggio, 50 years ago,
nobody cared about him. Yeah. Now everybody loves Caravaggio. They knows Caravaggio, and now Artemisia. Gentileschi. I still have trouble with that name. She is the new Caravaggio. She is. So I told one of my customers, so Carlo, we just had a book signing event, and Carlo came all the way from Washington to. Then he had to pick up my painting. He brought one of my paintings to this art book signing, and John Piero read part of the book. And Carlo bought a Gentileschi because I told him about her. He found one. I think there's not that many.
It's probably tripled in price.
Anyway, yeah, he bought one.
Yeah. So
anyway, that's the only. But you said up and coming. She's 400 years old. That's the only one I don't know.
It have to be up and coming. I think I've never heard of her, so I think it's really fascinating.
Oh, it is. To me, it's really fascinating because she's excellent. I forgot to mention she's a brilliant painter, and she's the first woman to ever make money painting. That's what I read one time. I don't know how true it is. Huh?
I have a question for Giampiero. What stirred your interest in investigating art forgery? And do you have any interesting tidbits that you've learned that you can share?
Yes. So what I worked, when I first met Tony, I was kind of a cub reporter, and I worked for Japanese TV for NHK, which is like Japan's BBC. And they were looking at art forgery and fake art values related to the bubble economy in Japan, and how they were using fake art to underwrite these crazy loans. So that's how I first came to it. And that's when I first met Tony. And, my interest in art forgery kind of went on from there. I think some of the interesting tidbits that I discovered, through making this documentary, plays a role in what we uncovered is while art forgery, like Tony did, is very, very, very difficult to do now, making a new painting that never existed. One thing that people are doing now is what's called upgrades or sleepers.
Oh, yeah.
So take an artist like Van Dyck. You can buy a Van Dyck circle, studio, or follower painting. And these are kind of meaningless terms. Studio means something, but follower and circle doesn't mean anything. It means somebody who painted in the style of or admired Van Dyck
at the same time.
Or sometimes at the same time. Yeah. But anyway, so you can buy a real Van Dyck costs maybe, let's say, 15 million. You could buy a circle of Van Dyck painting for 10,000. So rather than create a fake work of art, what people do is they buy a circle of Van Dyck, and then either through legal or illegal or corrupt means, get somebody important to say, oh, this is a real Van Dyck. This is an autograph Van Dyck. So now you've just turned a $10,000 painting into a $10 million painting just because you've sort of swayed opinion. And that's at the heart of a lot of the shenanigans that happen with art now.
Really? That replaced art forgery? Really?
Correct.
Correct. And think about that. It's a much easier way of doing it. But it is you're frauding people.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I always tell people, I say, if somebody came to me and said, look, we have your child, we're holding your child for ransom, and you need to come up with $5 million in a week. I think, if it was, life and death, you might look seriously at some kind of funny business in art because it's largely unregulated. The prices are subjective. You can just make them up, and there's not really much beyond an expert's opinion that will ratify or verify a painting.
That's really interesting.
It is.
I think Tony said it best. It's replacing art forgery. There's a fraud that's still happening. It's just sort of updating based on the circumstances.
I really haven't heard anything about current forgery. I haven't, but then again, I'm not in the galleries and I'm not doing this.
Yeah, I can definitely see how the influence of having someone with a large following or a large influence saying, like, look over here in this direction can cause a misdirect. and value where value isn't. I think that's, especially with things like AI generated art, like NFTs, that's something I feel like has happened really frequently.
Sure.
So we are going to take one more question before we wrap up, and it's for Tony. What makes someone a good art forger? What you probably got this a lot.
Well, no, actually, no, nobody has ever asked me what makes a good art forger. Tenacity, sticking with it, and I think perfectionism, trying to make sure you got the colors right, making sure that the texture is right, making sure that it looks like a piece of art from this artist. And that's more difficult than people may think. I mean, oh, I wish I could, you don't have the benefit of seeing it. Go to tonytetro.com and you can see some of my paintings, I guess.
I think one of the things that you told me about too is that the painting is not the only part of it. Like what really helps too, or what really makes a better forger is somebody who's great at the storytelling or the finding the reason for it to be plausible.
Well, that's the storytelling is one thing. Storytelling sounds like bullshit.
That's what it is.
This was
you have to be a good bullshitter.
No, it's making, why does this painting exist? And sometimes you could find things reading, like at Rembrandt, I did, that finding a mistake, finding a reason for your painting to exist. And I got good at that over time. And you're going to say, how could you find something? Well, it's just reading a lot and about that artist, and you'll come across something if you read a lot about it. That's another thing. Study the artist. Like Salvador Dali, he'd have 7 birds in one era, or he'd have different objects, a dog underneath a rug. And you can't put that in a 1930s painting when he did it in 1970. You have to be concise with the era that you're painting. And I could go on, but I'm going to stop there.
Well, that's what the book is for. Awesome. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Can pick up Con Artist in stores everywhere, and be sure to check out the documentary, The Royal Stunt, coming early next year. I, for one, am very excited to watch it. Thank you both for joining us, and thank you for all that have listened. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was great. Thank you.
Bye.
That was good.